It was supposed to be just another family gathering, a celebration for my nephew Ethan's 18th birthday. The house was buzzing with laughter, voices blending together, and the clinking of glasses in the background. Everyone was enjoying themselves, caught up in the festivities, but I found myself stepping away from the crowd for a brief moment of quiet. I slipped into the kitchen, thinking I could gather my thoughts. But what happened next? I could never have predicted. Ethan followed me in, and at first, it seemed like a harmless conversation. Nothing out of the ordinary, just two family members talking. But something in the air shifted. It wasn't the words, but the way the space between us suddenly felt different. Tighter. Charged. It's hard to explain, but in that brief moment, everything that had felt safe, familiar, suddenly felt out of my control. Subscribe now, and keep watching to find out what happened next. The house was filled with laughter, family, and friends, all celebrating Ethan's big milestone. Everyone was buzzing with excitement, the sound of chatter and clinking glasses filling the air. It should have been just another typical family gathering. But for some reason, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was different. Ethan, who had always been the shy kid in the family, had grown into someone unrecognizable in the best way. Over the past year, he had transformed. He wasn't just taller now, he had this undeniable confidence, a presence that pulled people in. His magnetic energy was impossible to ignore, and even I found myself caught in it, watching him from across the room. As I looked around, I felt this strange sense of tension. Everything seemed normal, but something about the way he carried himself, something about the way he was interacting with everyone, including me, felt different. Little did I know, this would be the moment that would change everything. It was after dinner when I needed a moment away from the noise, just a quiet escape into the kitchen. The party had been lively, everyone laughing and talking, and I could feel the weight of the conversations buzzing in the background. I thought stepping away for a minute would help clear my head, give me a chance to breathe. But as soon as I entered the kitchen, I wasn't alone for long. Ethan followed me in. At first, it seemed harmless enough. He started asking about my life, what I had planned next, what I thought he should do after high school. The kind of questions you'd expect from a young man standing on the edge of a new chapter. We talked like family does, casually, with no real urgency. There was nothing about this conversation that felt out of place at first. But as we spoke, something shifted. I noticed it, though I couldn't name it. Ethan had changed. His presence felt different. The shy kid I remembered was now replaced by someone who carried himself with an unfamiliar confidence. His posture, his tone, the way he spoke, all of it was different. And it wasn't just physical. There was a tension in the air that neither of us acknowledged, but it was there, unspoken and impossible to ignore. The more we talked, the more I felt this shift, like the space between us was growing smaller, tighter, charged. The usual ease of family conversation seemed to fade into something heavier, though neither of us said anything about it. We kept talking, but now, every word felt like it was laced with more meaning. His eyes lingered a bit longer than they should have. His proximity was closer than I expected. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was happening in that moment, something unspoken but undeniable. Ethan's words, his gaze, it was as if the conversation had moved beyond simple family chatter into something else entirely, something I wasn't prepared for. But then, things took a turn. What started as a casual conversation slowly began to shift, the words between us feeling heavier with each passing moment. I noticed it first in his eyes, how they seemed to lock with mine in a way that wasn't just casual, wasn't just the way family normally looks at each other. There was something in that gaze, something I couldn't quite place, but it made the air between us feel thick, charged. The conversation slowed, the light-hearted banter fading into an uneasy silence. The usual flow of words that would have easily bridged the gap between us seemed to disappear. Neither of us said anything for a long moment. We were standing there, just looking at each other, and it felt like the world outside the kitchen had disappeared. All I could hear was the pounding of my own heartbeat, loud and unsteady. There was a tension building, something I couldn't put my finger on but couldn't ignore either. The silence stretched on, thick and uncomfortable, like it was pressing in on me from all sides. I wanted to move, to break the moment, but my feet felt like they were cemented to the floor. It was as if something invisible was holding me there, keeping me rooted in place, locked in this strange, uncomfortable moment with him. I wanted to speak, to ask him what was going on, but the words didn't come. There was something unspoken, something hanging in the air that neither of us was willing to address. It felt like the space between us had collapsed, and what had once been a simple, familiar conversation had become something far more complex, something I didn't understand, something that was rapidly escalating beyond my control. And then, before I knew it, Ethan closed the space between us. One moment, we were standing in the kitchen, words still hanging in the air, and the next, his hand was reaching out, brushing against mine in a way that sent a shockwave through my entire body. My heart raced, my mind went blank, and before I could make sense of what was happening, he was closer, so close that I could feel the heat radiating off of him. Then, without warning, his lips pressed against mine. It wasn't gentle, it wasn't soft, it was forceful, desperate, and completely unlike anything I had ever experienced. It felt like the ground beneath me had shifted, and for a brief moment, I was caught in the chaos of emotions swirling inside me. I froze. My body was reacting before my mind could catch up, caught in the intensity of the moment. The shock of it all hit me like a tidal wave. I couldn't pull away. I didn't want to. There was this pull, this undeniable force that held me in place, that made me feel like I was unable to breathe without him there, like every part of me was drawn to him against my will. It was wrong. I knew it, deep down. Every cell in my body screamed that this should not be happening. But in that instant, nothing else seemed to matter. The conflict inside me was overwhelming. Part of me knew this was a mistake, but another part couldn't deny how irresistible it felt. It was a confusing, electrifying moment that left me lost in a whirlwind of emotions I couldn't control. And then something else happened. The moment in the kitchen was only the beginning. Without saying a word, Ethan took my hand and led me toward the hallway, his grip tight, almost urgent. My mind screamed that I should stop, that I should pull away, but my body betrayed me as I followed him, my feet moving of their own accord. It felt like I was floating, disconnected from everything but the pull of his presence. We reached the room. I knew it was wrong, every part of me understood that, but something in me couldn't resist. A part of me, deep down, wanted this, wanted him, even though I knew this would change everything. My heart pounded in my chest, and my breath caught in my throat. I stood there for a moment, torn between the truth of what was happening and the part of me that didn't want to stop, that didn't want to face the consequences of this moment. But the choice was slipping away from me with every passing second. The door clicked shut behind us, sealing us inside, and the world outside seemed to vanish. It was just us now, and whatever was happening between us was inevitable. I knew I should pull away, that I should stop this before it went any further, but the tension in the air, the heat that had built between us, it was like a fire that couldn't be extinguished. I couldn't make sense of it, couldn't reconcile the wrongness with the desire that surged inside me. What happened next was a blur. A whirlwind of emotions, a rush of physical connection, and a deep, gnawing sense of confusion. My thoughts were scattered, racing in every direction, but I couldn't find clarity. It felt like I was trapped in the aftermath of something I didn't fully understand, but knew, deep down, would haunt me. I had been swept up in it, carried away, and now I was left standing in the wreckage, trying to piece together what had just occurred. I paced back and forth, the silence around me only amplifying the chaos inside my mind. My hands trembled, my heart still pounding in my chest as if the weight of what had just happened was still pressing down on me. I couldn't look at myself in the mirror without seeing the guilt, the shame. I had let it happen. I hadn't stopped it when I should have. And now, the weight of that mistake was suffocating me. I had never seen Ethan like this before, never imagined anything like this could happen. What was this? Was it a moment of weakness? Was it something more? The questions didn't stop. I replayed everything in my head over and over, each time feeling more and more lost. Did I make it worse by letting it happen? Could I ever go back to the way things were before? I couldn't even begin to understand why or how it happened, but one thing was clear: it had changed everything. It had changed me, changed my relationship with him, and most of all, it had changed the way I saw myself. What I had done couldn't be undone, and the confusion only deepened as I tried to make sense of the emotional turmoil I was now drowning in. In the aftermath, I questioned everything. My family. My relationship with Ethan. How could something like this happen, in my own home, surrounded by the people I love, by those I thought I knew so well? The contrast was haunting, the laughter, the joy that had filled the air just hours before, now replaced with an overwhelming sense of betrayal and confusion. The memories of the celebration, of everyone gathered together, seemed so distant, so out of place in the wake of what had just occurred. I could see their faces, the people I'd known my whole life, laughing, enjoying themselves, completely unaware of the storm that had silently unfolded in the other room. How had it all gone so wrong, so quickly? How had I let it get this far? The trust that I thought I had with my family was now shattered. It felt like everything I believed in had crumbled in a matter of moments. How could I ever look at Ethan the same way again? How could I face my family when I knew what I had allowed to happen? The weight of the consequences pressed down on me, suffocating me with every passing second. I had betrayed more than just a moral boundary. I had betrayed the trust that held our family together, and that was something I wasn't sure could ever be repaired. I couldn't hide what had happened, but I didn't know how to face my sister, my family. The weight of the secret hung heavy in the air, suffocating me with each passing second. How could I even begin to explain what had happened? How could I tell them the truth about what unfolded that night, the choices I made, the decisions that would haunt me for the rest of my life? My heart pounded just thinking about it. How could I possibly face them, knowing that the trust we once shared was now shattered? And what did this mean for Ethan and me moving forward? Could we pretend that nothing had happened? Could I ever look at him the same way again? I had been living in a reality where boundaries were clear, where family meant safety and love. But now, that reality felt fragile, like a glass vase that had been dropped and shattered into 1,000 pieces. I couldn't escape the fact that what we shared, what I allowed to happen, had changed everything between us. I couldn't even look at him without remembering the kiss, the heat, the way it all felt so wrong yet so impossible to stop. I never saw him the same way after that night. Every glance felt loaded, every word we exchanged felt tainted. How could we ever go back to being family after what we had done? How could I look at him, or worse, my sister, and pretend everything was okay? The hardest part was knowing that the family dynamic I had once taken for granted was no longer the same. The laughter, the simple moments of connection, the way we all just fit together, everything felt off. It was like I was living in a house full of strangers, even though they were the people I had known my entire life. How could I go back to the way things were, when there was a part of me that had been forever altered by what had happened? The trust, the understanding, the comfort, it was all gone. Could I ever earn it back? Would they ever be able to forgive me? Or was I doomed to carry this burden alone? And what about Ethan? What did this mean for us? Was there even a way forward? The thought of facing him, of dealing with the consequences of what we had done, it was more than I could bear. But in the silence of my mind, I knew one thing for sure: nothing would ever be the same. The question was, could we find a way to make peace with it, or had everything we once had been lost forever? But just when I thought things couldn't get any worse, they did. I thought I had seen the worst of it, that the confusion, the guilt, the shattered trust were the hardest things I'd ever have to face. But I was wrong. I was about to be thrust into a situation that would turn everything I thought I knew upside down. I found myself caught in a moment, a conversation, where Ethan wasn't the only one hiding something from me. The weight of what had happened between us was nothing compared to what I was about to discover. It was as if the walls around me were closing in, and suddenly, the secrets I had already been carrying weren't the only ones threatening to destroy everything. A new truth, one that I wasn't prepared for, came crashing into my world. It wasn't just Ethan. The more I uncovered, the more I realized that everything I thought I knew about my family, about the people closest to me, was a lie. The layers of deception were deeper than I ever could have imagined. And what I discovered next, it changed the course of everything. It shattered the fragile world I had been trying to piece together. What I had uncovered wasn't just another betrayal, it was something far bigger, something I wasn't sure I could ever come back from. The truth had a way of tearing apart everything, and now, there was no going back. I was left with so many questions. Was this just an isolated incident, or was there something more going on that I never saw? How could I have missed the signs, the hidden layers of betrayal that had been building right under my nose? What happens when you lose control of everything you thought you knew about your family? And how do you pick up the pieces when everything falls apart, when the very people you trusted turn out to be the ones who will hurt you the most? The weight of the unknown was crushing, each question piling on top of the last. I couldn't make sense of it all. How do you go back from something like this? How do you even begin to heal when you're not sure what, if anything, can be fixed? As I stood there, staring out the window, lost in thought, everything seemed so far away. The life I knew, the family I thought I had, it was slipping through my fingers, and I had no idea how to stop it. The answers felt so out of reach, and all I could do was wonder what would come next. If you want to hear the rest of this shocking story and find out how everything unraveled, make sure you subscribe and hit the bell icon. You don't want to miss what happens next. The truth is still out there, and trust me, it's a lot more complicated than I ever could have imagined. Leave your thoughts in the comments below. What would you have done in my place? Could you forget what happened, or would you walk away? I want to hear from you. Don't forget to like, subscribe,